Executive Forum is an initiative driven by the XPGTM batch of XLRR. The forum allows students to interact with industry stalwarts who share valuable insights on their roles and responsibilities, their knowledge about the industry, and the diverse corporate challenges they faced. The forum gives students a wholesome experience by providing the taste of the corporate world along with the incredible exposure and learning experience they get in the classrooms.
I think we can start formally. Hello everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to have Mr. Sameer Sathe, the Executive Vice President of Advantage India at Wadhwani Foundation for this discussion. Mr. Sameer has around 28 years of global experience in strategy and transformation consulting. He has been part of Universal Consulting India Private Limited, an Indian strategy consulting firm, for almost 23 years. Now he heads Advantage program at Wadhwani Foundation in India and Middle East. The foundation is a global philanthropic organization with a mission to create job and change life. Mr. Sameer also guides the talent acquisition function at the foundation. Under Sameer's leadership, within 2 to 3 years, the Advantage program has served almost more than 600 SMEs and has created and protected over thousands of jobs and has deeply engaged with the ministries and MSME focused organization to uplift the MSME ecosystem. Mr. Sameer is also an alumnus of INSEAD. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. It's wonderful to have you here. So before starting with our question, I would like to formally introduce my co-hosts, Shivangi and Raj. If you can introduce yourself, Shivangi and Raj, just once.
Hello, sir. I'm Shivangi Gupta. We are currently batch of XPGTM 2022. And we are happy to have you here.
Thank you. This is Raj Chadhavi, sir. Very happy to have an interaction with you. Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction.
Thank you, sir. So to begin with the questions, I will start with the questions. I have basically 2 questions for you, sir. And you have very vast experience in MSME sector. So first question is in that sector, related to that sector only. So basically almost 29% of India's GDP comes from MSME and almost 60 to 70% of labor force is also employed in this sector. So my question is, how do you see the recovery of this extremely important sector after COVID? Because it has been mostly affected by the COVID in a very bad way.
So firstly, I think in terms of the Indian MSME sector, our internal calculations suggest that the contribution actually has gone down from 29% to 24-25%. And the dent that has happened, the delta between 29% and 25-24%, is largely on account of 2-3 key reasons. And this kind of mirrors what COVID has done to the small sector, which sort of answers your main question. What has happened really is that if you really segment the Indian MSMEs into 3-4 key buckets, there are companies which are less than 1 crore Indian currency sort of revenue. There are companies which are less than 5 crores. There are companies which are between 5 crores and 20 crores. And there are companies between 20 crores and 100 crores. And there are companies between 100 crores and 250 crores. If you really look at the impact of COVID on these different segments, if I were to really look at the massive erosion of wealth which has happened, has largely happened, interestingly, on the sector which is less than 1 crore. There's micro enterprises, because they are really sort of very badly hit. The impact on the companies which are about 20 crores has been very high, but it's not as severe as one would have witnessed in case of the companies below 1 crore revenue threshold, right? If you really look at there are 3 reasons why the impact has happened. Firstly, all the enterprises that we have in India, there are about 63.3 million as per the government database. Our estimates suggest that there are actually 75 to 80 million MSMEs. About 1/4 of them really face the risk of extinction or consolidation given the COVID, because fundamentally they were not strong enough. Nobody anticipated COVID. Nobody was keeping the cash reserves for tomorrow. Everybody lived the day to fight the fires for that day. And that's largely one of the main reasons why they were kind of, the phenomenon of shock and awe, as you see, that they were kind of really caught off guard when COVID hit them. And whenever the trauma hits anybody and then you're not in good health already, the trauma can really damage your health. It's there in our Indian sort of health system as well, right? If your immunity system is weak, if you are a weak person, any small sort of change in the atmosphere or the weather or any harsh conditions or any trauma which is caused to physical body will result in ill health or some disease, right? This is exactly what has happened to India. Indian MSMEs fundamentally were not strong. They were optimally they were suboptimal in terms of their size, in terms of competitiveness, management capability, cash reserves, ability to basically think about the future and build for the future. All these things were not there, which is why they were severely hit and now they're caught off guard. So it has done two things to these companies. One, it has sort of at the psychological level, from the entrepreneur's point of view, a lot of them are actually suffering from mental health. They are actually suffering from the phenomenon that it is an existential crisis. That is not easy, right? Because an enterprise represents in many ways, it's like a baby to a mother, right? And that's the kind of relationship between an entrepreneur and the enterprise. So when the enterprise gets hit, just like mother would be completely anxious if the child gets hurt, that's what has happened with a lot of these entrepreneurs. And therefore, it's time for them to recover psychologically. At the economically, from their enterprise's point of view, they are suffering from the depletion of revenue anywhere between 20% to 50%, which is huge, right? The profit margins were anyway thin. So any such shocks would have dented their margins and gone into losses, right? Just like a lot of Indians are actually, since 2019, this is the first time India is witnessing people going back to poverty. It's exactly the same in MSMEs, when Indian corporate sector is witnessing MSMEs going back to losses, even if they were earning some profits. And I think, if you look at this situation and if you look at what is needed for them to recover and will they recover, how will they recover? The main question is that how you're going to build up your demand pipeline, because it's very easy to cry for subsidies, money, cash, and understandably so, because when somebody is hungry, somebody cries for food. But if somebody knows how to cook the food and has the ingredients to cook the food, they will not ask somebody else. So one of the most important things that Indian MSMEs should do is to equip themselves with the knowledge, with the management capability to be able to run and govern their enterprise in the most professional manner, which has been the big sort of lacuna for years, decades, centuries. Because they are all family enterprises. Only the second, third, fourth generation may have been exposed to better ways of working. And they don't think necessarily, they're not as ambitious as your Western counterparts. In Western US or Europe, for example, if you're a $1 million company, they think of 5 million. If you're a 5 million, they think of 50 million. If you're 50, their ambition is to reach 500. Indian businessmen, Indian businesswomen, they are both to that extent more complacent with their Western counterparts. So if they reach a particular level, they would rather flaunt their wealth than earning more. And that's something that they need to change. From the capabilities point of view, they need to build their management capabilities that will equip them to handle these shocks in future better, and then think of tomorrow better. So it means better strategies, better business planning, using data for sort of making decisions. Most of them don't. It's all gut feel and their interactions and anecdotal evidence. Nobody uses data effectively. Ability to manage people, change management, project management skills. So there are a lot of these things that they need to really do fundamentally. They need to learn about all that. And this is what Foundation does. We equip them, we empower them with the capabilities to maximize their growth potential. Then I believe that they will come out of this crisis well. So my prediction is that you will actually see consolidation going forward in next 1 or 2 years for sure. So let's not flinch, let's not sort of mince these words. It's going to happen. There are many companies which are going to die, many companies which are going to consolidate. But in many ways, it's also a cleanup of the system. Because if the system can carry, imagine a system carrying patients, the burden on the system is always high. Similarly here, if the system carries a lot of the suboptimally performing enterprises, it is a burden on the resource. There's a drain on the resources of the system. So we would rather carry a system which is healthy. So therefore, some consolidation is going to happen. There are enterprises in certain industries which are going to prosper. And I believe that India has the strong resilience to be able to do that. So those enterprises which remain on the ground in the battlefield, they ought to develop their capabilities to think about 3 years hence, 5 years hence, 10 years hence, then they can survive. So my prediction is that there will be consolidation to the extent of 15-20% of Indian MSME ecosystem. There will be, we have actually gone back to 2017-18, in terms of where we are in terms of economic progress or the threshold limit for GDP and so on and so forth. So even if right now you see the GDP growth of 20%, 30%, it's nominal. It's on the baseline, which is much lower than what one witnessed in 2017 and 18. So therefore, it will take 3-4 years for Indian economy to develop in true sense in terms of reaching back to its potential, what you talked about. So that's what I feel.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your answer. It was insightful indeed.
Sir, I think your video is lagging a little bit. Can you please check your internet connection once?
Sure, of course. I think sometimes the connection is a problem. Let me see. Yeah, I think there's some problem with the connection. Just give me a minute. It will come back. I think just
it's
2 minutes.
It's better.
It's better.
I think it's better.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I really like your idea of cooking your food yourself rather than being dependent on others. I mean, it totally makes sense. So my next question to you, sir, is how has the strategy management evolved over the years? Because you have had a lot of experience, and how do you think any person should be ready to adapt to these changes that might come in the future? Because see, one is COVID, second it would be the post-COVID phase, right? And how do you think the strategy is going to impact with it? And how do you think we as a professional should be ready for it?
Yeah, I think the field of strategy consulting and in context of what is happening in India with COVID, it has changed dramatically. Way back, the genesis of strategy consulting happened many years ago, a century ago, in fact. 1926, McKinsey was born. 1962, BCG was born. 1972, Bain was born. And then many firms followed. Arthur D. Little, for example, started in 1886. That's a long time ago. But real field of strategy consulting evolved very highly in 50s and 60s, 1950s and 60s, when there was so much thinking around building insights. So management consultants were appointed to build insights, right? And of course, Big Four, one of you, Raj, you have been in Deloitte Consulting, you know that, right? So a lot of the Big Four also emerged dramatically in the audit, advisory, tax related fields, while the MBBs of the world and the boutique consulting firms started talking about strategy, insights, developing growth plans, and so on and so forth. And later on, there was a lot of emphasis on performance improvement, a lot of emphasis on implementation, because increasingly the clients started feeling that just by receiving gyan from intellectuals is not enough. You need to make it happen on the ground, right? So a lot of the consulting fraternities started talking about implementation in 90s. And of course, now everybody is focused on delivering to its promise. The payment structures have changed. Everything is dependent on success. And in the context of COVID, it has dramatically shifted, because I think a lot of firms, a lot of professionals ought to think in terms of ecosystems than just enterprises or clients or individual clients. They ought to think in terms of payment terms differently. They need to be a party. They need to be a partner with the client to actually make things happen. And in many ways, it's actually cyclical, because the definition of the role of a professional is changing. There are many skills needed differently. Shivangi, you're doing AI. AI, everybody's talking about AI, right? Our foundation does a lot of work in AI as well, right? But fundamentally, companies need to first learn the basics of how to use data, basic data. Forget the big data, forget the AI, forget the other things. Basic data, right? How to use information, how to make deductions, how to make inferences, how to marry it with intuition, using inductive logic, deductive logic. These are all the fundamental things. Nobody trains the professionals on these skills, unfortunately. And that is the need of the hour. once that happens, then one can learn a little more sophistication in terms of data analytics and big data and then AI and so on and so forth, right? And there are many emerging fields within that as well. So my feeling is that a professional nowadays needs to think about all these things as a given. There is no choice, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if one is not upgrading one's skills on a daily basis, one will be a problem in recruitment or any job market tomorrow, right? All of you are from XLRI, so you will lead your lives going forward. You will realize that the rate at which you change your skills and upgrade your skills directly has a correlation with your success. The moment you sit on that you have proved it, you have done very well, and then continue with that without learning new skill, you will be in trouble. So I think that's something that today's professionals must understand on a regular basis, regardless of which company they join, which industry they join, it doesn't really matter. And I think the nature of work is also changing dramatically, right? It's hybrid, it's online, it's in person, together. The way you interact with your employer, the way you interact with your employees, the way you interact with your customers and suppliers, everything is changing, right? So I think the sooner the professional understands that, and the hungrier that he or she becomes in terms of acquiring new skills and retaining the old ones, the better will be the chances of the success, especially after COVID, because the nature of work is changing so much.
So the change is the only constant. As you suggested, that we need to keep upgrading ourselves rather than just being complacent of where we are. So now I think Raj, have a question with you. Raj, please take the stage.
Thank you, sir. That was very insightful. So AI has been coming from a lot of years back, and after Harvard published its article, AI has completely boomed and has been called the most sexiest job of the new century. And we see there is a lot of workforce also which is coming up in India right now. Everybody is getting trained on AI. Even MBA schools are getting up their courses on AI. What are the challenges did you face while implementing AI-based solution in MSME? And what do you think is the impact on the job? Because the general perception is that the AI ends up taking away the job, right? So what can we say about that?
Sure. So firstly, in terms of the challenges that we faced in terms of implementing AI in MSMEs, that I would say we are just at the beginning of the curve in MSMEs, right? Because MSMEs do not have even the basic transaction processing systems which are integrated. Forget the intelligence, forget the rest of the stuff, right? Even a 50 crore company, 100 crore company, you will find that there are islands of information. Every work is done in Excel. It's residing in the heads of people, and it's so they have to get a lot of their basics right. So the most important challenge in AI is to first do your data strategy right. Do the data strategy right. Look at what kind of data needs to be massaged. Look at what kind of data lakes you need to build. Look at what is the ontology you need to build in terms of figuring out where the data is going to be used to solve what problems, right, etc. And I think Indian MSMEs have a long way to go, and therefore the challenge that we have is to not to really force fit everything, right? Because every learner has a capacity to learn. Indian MSMEs also will learn in steps, right? So although we want to make them and educate them and understand them about the whole benefits of AI and so on and so forth, using data for the decision making, we have to take baby steps and create a habit. So habit formation is very important. So if they don't form a habit, then they will never learn to sort of use data effectively. So that's the most important challenge. While people are talking about it, there's so much awareness, there is so much articles being published. People like me, everybody is talking about AI, whatever. But at the end of the day, one has to understand when it comes to implementation and on a day-to-day basis, it's very important for them to truly appreciate how it's going to help their lives on a daily basis. Unless they do that, they're not going to change rapidly. So the most important challenge is to ensure that it's not force-fitted and pushed down the throat. Secondly, ensure that we take baby steps to build a habit and then actually look at the big sort of initiatives. And third, to ensure that they understand what are their applications, their real daily lives, as opposed to it being a buzzword and catchy word, sexy word, etc. So I think those are the things that challenges one needs to overcome. In terms of your second question, I think taking the jobs away, whether it's restoring jobs or not, I would say, in the short term, it will take away some jobs which are repeatable in nature in many industries, including in healthcare, and where the expertise was very valued. A doctor is a doctor. But in many cases, AI is replacing their expertise opinion on even the deadliest of the diseases, basically. So yes, in the short term, it will take away some jobs, no shying away from the fact. But in the long term, it is likely to create jobs, not take away, because it's very clear. I'm very clear that AI has tremendous applications and potential if handled correctly, and if handled with the right balance between ethics and privacy and some of the other things which are being talked about. AI has a potential to create new applications, new industries, new desires, new wants, new needs. And when the markets are created, you automatically have demand supply situation there. So there is an opportunity to create jobs there also. But we are just seeing I would say now it's a massive explosion in 2020s, which is happening in terms of the applications. But I think fundamentally, you will see a curve wherein there is on the short term, there is a job losses, but in the long term, you will have job creation.
Okay, that's really great. Actually, this is the most important interview question that we would be getting. That okay, you are working into AI, you are taking away the jobs. What next? So yeah, it will be a short-term drop that we'll be seeing on the graph, but later on it will be increasing, and it's like a boon to everybody.
So, and it's also inevitable. We cannot live without it, without implementing.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
we cannot accept the benefits that the AI is providing, so we will have to adapt it. But yeah.
And as we also are learning into our economics courses that we are getting right now, it is very much understandable to let the market grow and not to interfere too much in the market, which has been one of the principle itself. So I understand that in the current times when there will be a lot of employment switches, when we have a very high unemployment rate right now, and using AI right now would be again not be good to stop it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a massive shift in even terms of the skilling that happens within the employees, right? Because there is a need to unlearn, there is a need to relearn, there is a need to, trade up basically in terms of their capabilities. And I think if they don't do that, even the current retention of the employees will become a problem, because you will find that the external marketplace change rate is greater than the internal change of capabilities. Which means that you're lagging. If you're lagging, you're not going to be competitive. You'll not survive over a period of time. So, to me, I think it's the sooner entrepreneurs understand themselves learn, and then educate their own employees that they need to change the way they operate and make themselves better skilled. If they don't do that, it will be difficult.
Right. So, sir, now comes a question that every individual from our batch would like to ask you. So a lot of people dream of getting a consulting knowledge from a reputed institutes like INSEAD. How does it feel to be on the other side of the road?
No, I was very happy with INSEAD education, because, as you know, it's one of the most premier sort of institutes in the world. And I was trained in terms of using the psychodynamic principles in the organization setting to build reflective leaders. So that was the focus basically. And, it's incredible because I think it's more than the content. I think the experience of really learning from different sources is very important, right? The way the subjects are taught is incredibly exciting and enriching, because one not necessarily builds up only the knowledge of the subject, which of course it is the latest, and curricula are always latest, but I think more importantly is the way it is conducted, the way the learning happens, the way interactions happen, enrich the experience and learning far better. It's peer learning, it's exchange of ideas, it's about not a professor and student. It's a professor becomes a student becomes a professor. There is ability to sort of understand from culture's point of view, and that really is a massive learning. So I'm incredibly thankful to God and happy to have experienced some of this being there. And it came late in my life, not at your age, right? So I did that much later in my life. I did first my practical experience, then sort of did ONSIAD, and this is one of the very important sort of programs that they have for executives. And I can vouch for it. I mean, it's incredibly important.
So it's never too late to pursue anything new in life, right?
Never. I'm a firm believer that till I die, there is something new to learn in any case.
Mm-hmm. So now I think Rahul have a question with you.
Yes, sir. I have one more question actually. So what would be your next vision in terms of social relation activity? Would you like to give any message to the youth from your experience?
Sure. I think one message very clearly that comes to my mind is that I think it's very important to really leverage what you have, what you're born with, and be very thankful and have the sense of gratitude that we are amongst the luckier ones, frankly. There are millions out there who don't see the daylight, that don't have enough meal. So we are incredibly lucky. I think the first of all, realize that the moment you realize that there is a gratitude and there is a thankfulness, and that is very important because when you are beginning your life, just ensure that youth is super important. So it's not only about realizing your own potential and advance in life, but I think you should be of utility to others. I think that sense is very critical right from the beginning. And I think I have witnessed that when I interact with youth today. Today's generation is much more socially aware than our generation, even before that, our generation, our parents and our forefathers. So, the unit of their thought process was limited to family and near dear ones. Today, I think with the exposure, knowledge, and all the things that we do, your age, you are exposed to so many things. So your thought process unit is very different, right? You think in global terms. You're kind of encouraged to think in global terms. So the expanse of your thought process it ought to be good. And I think don't leave it to chance when you grow in your life and you build those skills, and ensure that you return to society in some way or the other. If you have that attitude, I would say these are the 2-3 messages that I want to give to you guys. If you can do that, I think lives will be better. Lives will be worth living. And that's how I would sum up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for wonderful advices. We will definitely try to follow them in the coming days ahead.
It's a brilliant idea of leveraging of what we already have and having a gratitude, sensing it, and giving back to the society. So my next question to you is, sir, what as a talent acquisition professional do you see a mid-level consultant as? I mean, what are the skills that you look at? What makes a person perfect for that so-called consultant job?
The nature of consulting is changing. Like I said, I think that tomorrow's consultant will be the one who is not an insight builder only, is not a great Excel and PowerPoint skilled person only. I think in terms of rigor of thinking, analytical prowess, ability to communicate both in verbal and written very professionally, ability to have relationship building skills, and nurture them, and then actually encourage them in others as well. Tomorrow's consultant will be the one who is able to, again, going back to my earlier point, is able to again upgrade one's skills faster. I think that's a true consultant, because the nature of the demands from the clients is changing rapidly. So it has implications on the nature of skills that consultants should adopt rapidly as well, right? So an ideal mid-level consultant will be the one who is able to balance really the tomorrow's skills with today's value propositions or skills that he or she is offering to his or her client. And I think that balance is very important. We used to have this whole notion of care by zone. So every consultant goes through what, how, and why. A true consultant, a great advisor, is the one who is able to transcend and goes beyond just listening to the client and doing what client wants, to actually anticipate and understand what's the best for the client, and are in a position to actually help the client accordingly. So even before client says that this is what I want, if the consultant is able to anticipate that, if consultant is able to objectively even question what client wants, that will be the true merit of a consultant, basically. And to me, therefore, the roles of the mentor, the coach, the advisor, the consultant are all kind of morphing. Earlier there was a lot of distinction between who's a mentor, expert, and consultant, and so on and so forth. But they're morphing, they're changing rapidly, they're converging. That's how typically will be the starting point of a mid-level consultant, because those are the exact skills that he or she is going to develop as a partner or as a senior executive in any company.
Thank you, sir. That was really great service.
Yeah.
Our batch,
details that are vital, right? The little details make the big things happen. So definitely it makes sense that understanding your client is at your topmost priority. So the next question is from Raj. Raj, please take it forward.
Thank you, sir, for the insights into it. In our batch, sir, we have 114 people over here, and many of them are interested into strategy and consulting, sir. And I would ask you what advice you will give for the students and the candidates who are over here to start pursuing and get into this sector.
So, I think being selfish, I will say come to the foundation. But in being unselfish, I will say that I think it's very important for you guys to sort of even take a stint, talk to your profs and see whether you can take a stint at the foundation to just experience how this is, just to consult with the SMEs, because it's hard, it's not easy. It's not as easy as one would consult with a large corporate. Large corporates already has professionals, they're different. This thing. SMEs is a different ballgame altogether. So best is to gain that experience live, and then get into the real world, whatever you want to do, even if it is for a short period of time, it is still worthwhile. I think the other advice I would give is basically everybody wants to get into consulting immediately. It might be a good idea to get some implementation industry experience, then think about consulting, and then look at building careers, if at all you are interested in building careers in consulting. But at the end of the day, remember, gone are the days when consultant used to come, do the analysis, give the recommendations, and walk away. Tomorrow's consultant will have to be almost like an internal employee to the company, right? And if that is going to happen, then you need to develop those skills and experience that lifestyle before you become a consultant in a firm that you want to be in. So that would be my advice.
So we have people who are coming in from different domains. So what they would want to do is they would want to implement. They'll want to utilize the knowledge that they already have. But let's say a person who is coming from a PSU or a banking sector job. How can this kind of person will be able to utilize his knowledge into consulting?
So I think I'll go back to my earlier thing, leverage what you have. So if you have domain knowledge of banking and financial services, find out a firm who has large client base in banking and financial services, right? That's where you'll get an opportunity to leverage your knowledge. Find out the applications of your knowledge of banking finance. Is it in payments? Is it in digital space? Is it in space where banking and financial services knowledge can be used to basically look at developing corporate finance capability in some companies? So I think if you look at the dimension of what knowledge you're equipped with, and then say, how is it going to want to leverage that? You need to find an employer that is going to give you that. So aim for only that. Do not aim for brand. Do not aim for money. Do not aim for power or brand at the starting stage of your career. I would strongly advise, wherever the rate of learning is highest, that's your employer. Wherever you believe that you're going to gain skills, that's your employer. So therefore, if it's a banking, financial services, PSU, different domains, first thing to do is to find an employer which will give leverage to the knowledge and then build expertise there. And it's not limited there, because then, like I said, I think you need to build other skills as well. So that would be how you should treat it.
Yeah, so running after money is not going to make sense. Run after knowledge, right?
Run after knowledge, money will follow. Money will follow your power will follow, everything will follow, frankly. So don't get allured and enamored of all these things at the young age. It's very easy, of course, at your age, but I'm just alerting you.
I mean, it is the attractive part, right? So you cannot get away with
glamour, ultimately glamour, right? So at the end of the day, everybody wants excitement, glamour. So that's natural. So it's not wrong. But I think when you make a good, sound decisions for your life, choose a company which will really transform you in terms of your knowledge and experience.
Yeah. So there are two things. One is money, and one is the kind of profile that you're getting. You can't have it all. You cannot have it all, right?
You cannot have it all. Yeah.
And Raj, do you have any questions? Any more questions?
Shivangi, I will just go ahead with one more question. Sir, as you said, I have been working in AI field for last 5 years, and it's pretty simple to convince a customer in large corporate what is the benefit if I am investing this much. But how do we convince MSMEs? Because there they don't see the benefit directly, so it would be pretty difficult.
Yeah, I mean, everything is basically awareness building, education, and then going with a strong value proposition. So, like I said earlier, MSMEs are dealing with the basic issues of data management, right? AI is a buzzword that they are aware of, they have read. So I think the only way to convince an MSME is to either demonstrate through case studies or demonstrate through pure logic, because it's like, I mean, you don't basically write essays in English unless you learn ABCD, right? So if it's very simple. So if you are able to write essays, plus you are able to also create a synopsis and write executive summaries better. And if you are both at the two ends of the spectrum, right? But basically, if you don't learn English language, you will not be able to do either. So it's very simple. So you tell the MSME that if you want to play a big game, you need to play a small game first, right? And start there. No point in just jumping the gun and say everybody requires it and just do it. It will backfire. It won't.
Definitely, sir. So it was a great and exciting advice, I would say, and it was a fresh set of thoughts that you gave us. So over to you, Raj. Raj will be giving you a vote of thanks. And from my end, I really enjoyed your session, and you were quite well in answering my questions. So I'm really happy about it.
Thank you.
Same for me, sir. It was quite enlightening.
Yes.
Many things that we were not aware of, many challenges that people are facing at different levels we were not aware we came to. So thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the best part was that, okay, a lot of people want to get into consulting, but they do not know how the life is going to be after 20 years from now. So you are the person, you're the perfect example of how it is going to be.
Thank you. I've been lucky, I must say.
That's very modest for you, sir. So on the behalf of Accelerate EXPGATEM batch 21-22, sir, I thank you for taking out your valuable time to have an interactive session with all of us and talking about strategy management, MSME, AI, and how pandemic has affected and changed us all. I'm sure the whole batch will get to learn and benefit from this session, especially the budding consultant. Thank you again for joining us, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Shivangi. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Sarvesh. I really appreciate the opportunity. I had a lovely time. I love interacting with students and all of you, and that's one of the areas that I love. I love to teach. So I think some of these things help me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure as always for coming, sir, and very good morning, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye, sir.